Hello everyone, it's Incredible Crime Story Channel, and we are going to examine a case today that made headlines in the USA in 2019. It is as unusual as it is heartbreaking. The story begins with what appears on its face to be a horrible mistake, a collection of bad circumstances that culminated in the death of an exceptional person who was only starting out in life. As the facts of this incident emerged at trial, the tragic accident took on a different interpretation. One in which a split-second decision, one to shoot to kill, changed everything. Let's take a look at just past 10 p.m. on September 6, 2018, a Thursday night, as Officer Amber Guyger of the Dallas Police Department was returning home after completing her shift. She pulled into a parking space at the Southside Flats apartment complex where she had lived for just under 2 months. Amber reversed her white pickup truck into the space at her building. This was a habit she had developed through her police training, one of many. It meant that she could, if and when needed, drive out quickly and easily. Amber was a 5-year veteran of the police department, and on that Thursday night, she was returning from over 13 hours on duty. It was one of a string of longer days that she had worked that week, clocking up overtime for every hour that she stayed past 4 p.m. on her way to her apartment door. Amber was burdened with a pile of police equipment and various bags she had just left work, and the police station was just around the corner, so she remained in uniform but carried in all of her accessories. These she handled all on her left-hand side, which was yet another habit developed from police training, so she kept her strong side free for swift access to her holsters in case she needed to access her weapon. Quickly down 2 corridors and to the front door of her unit, she held out the key fob to access her apartment. She noticed first that the door was a little ajar, and she also thought that she could hear a shuffling noise from inside. Simply holding her key fob towards the electric lock applied enough pressure to swing the door open. No one left alive, except for Amber knows exactly what happened next. Did the person in the apartment call out to her? Did that person rush or move towards her? What is not in dispute is that the next action Amber took was to fire her weapon twice. Moments later, Amber turned on the lights. She looked around, and she doesn't recognize the couch. Then she doesn't recognize the TV set. And then everything else is unknown to her except the layout of the unit itself. She is in the wrong apartment, standing exactly 1 floor above her own home, and there's a man that she also does not know laying at her feet. Tates 20 times in the course of that 5 minutes that she thought she was entering her own apartment. She states twice that she is very tired. She apologizes to the man that she has shot. She also exclaims more than once that the incident will almost certainly mean that she will lose her job, considering the proximity from the Southside Flats apartment complex and the police station where Amber works. The time from dispatch to arrival at the address is only 2 minutes, and the police respond to the building and approach with guns drawn. During this time, it's not clear that Amber had attempted any CPR or attempted to stem the bleeding. She is outside the door of the apartment when the officers reach the 4th floor. In the body cam footage of Officer Michael Lee, Amber is seen guiding the police into the correct apartment on camera. Only briefly, she is heard explaining that she is off duty, that she called, and again, that she believed the apartment was hers. Pacing on the balcony outside of the apartments, Amber stayed present at the scene, but mostly out of the way, while EMTs rush out with the man she has shot in his home. She found a seat inside a police cruiser. She places her head down away from the emergency efforts underway and appears to be texting. As she does, this medical personnel rush past a sergeant, then leans in and instructs another officer to turn off the dash camera in the cruiser. He says he gave this instruction so that Amber could call her lawyer. 26-year-old Botham Jean finished his work that day at the Big Four accounting firm PricewaterhouseCoopers, or just PwC, and was watching Thursday night NBA basketball. He loved sports, but his biggest passion was singing. Born in St. Lucia to parents Allison and Botham, he was a middle child with a sister 10 years older and baby brother 10 years younger. His mother said he was the glue of the family, linking everyone together. The stories told of both of them are of a man that was compassionate, thoughtful, and accomplished. In St. Lucia, he had ranked amongst the top students on the island in academic ability, earning him a spot in the top-ranked high school. There, his love of singing was the motivation behind forming a school choir. He graduated with an award called the Spirit of St. Mary for students excelling in academics, but also extracurriculars. Both of his parents agreed he wasn't just a sharp-minded youth, he was also exceptionally kind-hearted, following the principles of his Christian faith. He was the type of person who was always seeking out ways to help those in need. While in St. Lucia, he befriended an elderly blind man that needed some company. So both of them made regular visits and sang to the man after graduating high school. Botham worked for a couple of years before pursuing his dream. He was very keen to attend university and to study accounting, which brought him to Harding University in Arkansas. Harding is a Christian university, which suited him well, and he thrived there, as one of his best friends would say of him. Years later, everyone knew both of them. He immediately made everyone feel welcome. He just stood out after moving to the USA. He formed a central role in organizing a community assistance group that went out in the neighborhood and helped out people in whatever way they needed. They cleaned up people's yards, they helped them move, they engaged positively with their community. And while he helped people, he connected with them often, spreading his joy through singing. After graduation, he started his career in Dallas and so on. The 6th of September, he relaxed for the night at home in the Southside Flats apartment complex. He texted friends some silly memes of good time spent together, and he had a bowl of ice cream. Then sometime just after 10 p.m. that evening, his apartment door opened. Moments later, he was struck in the chest by a 9mm bullet. Botham Jean would die from that shot, and the Dallas Police Department had the good sense to stay away from an investigation that involved their own, and so the case was handed over to the Texas Rangers. These investigators sat down with Amber Guyger the day following, which was the 7th of September 2018. Did you visually see that the door wasn't locked? I honestly just put it in. I didn't even usually, I'm like, oh, it's slightly ajar. You can tell it's opened a little bit. It's slightly ajar. And so that's when I push in the key, more like to the door opens a little bit. I'm like, someone's in here. I hear you moving around. And so I automatically draw my weapon. I was scared. I thought I was going to die. I don't know what else was here. And then the apartment goes this way. Okay, I'm literally like this, like still on the metal portion part, okay? And I'm holding the door. Here, the door frame, I'm holding the door open, and I see a shadow way back there, and that's when I draw, and I'm trying to point at you. So I draw, I said, let me see your hands. Let me see your hands. He was way back there. He ended up towards the arms of the couch closest to the kitchen, and I shot 2 times. I'm thinking because he's moving around so much, he's not listening, people. When they say, let me see your hands, they're going to stop what they're doing. They're not going to continue moving. In your experience, has that been the case? Usually, like outside of this, when you've commanded somebody, yeah, they usually comply. Or if they take off running, go run after them. One topic returned to throughout this initial interview is Amber's schedule and sleeping patterns. She worked 6 days a week, Monday to Friday, 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. as a police officer, then another 8 a.m. to 1 p.m. shift every Saturday at a Baptist church. She said most of her days started at about 5:30 a.m., including overtime hours in her regular shift, a trip to the gym, and sleep by about midnight. She claimed to have gotten 5 hours of sleep the night before the shooting. 2 days following the interview, an arrest warrant was issued for a charge of second-degree manslaughter, and Amber was placed on paid leave from the police force, which remained in place for 18 days after the shooting, but protests and demonstrations outside of police headquarters. In City Hall, calling out what was perceived as preferential treatment of the police applied pressure on Dallas police. Amber was fired from her job, and later that same month, a grand jury returned an indictment for the more serious charge of murder in Texas. There is no first-degree designation, but a murder conviction requires the condition of malice, which meant that the state had determined that they could prove that Amber had not just acted recklessly that night, but that she acted with an intent to kill. When the trial commenced, the prosecution began by laying the foundation of this intent. There were 2 shots fired towards John from the police officer's pistol. It was what law enforcement referred to as a double tap, which is 2 shots in rapid succession as opposed to 1. The intention of firing in this way is to increase the likelihood of hitting and of fatally wounding the target or individual, and was found lodged in the wall of the apartment. State prosecutors suggested that this was intended as a headshot, one that missed, because Bo was likely in motion, perhaps still in the midst of standing from his seat on the couch. This path is very revealing because it is consistent with the fact that Bo was getting up from a seated position facing the door as Amber Guyger was coming into his home. The only other reasonable position that would explain that kind of a path is equally as innocuous for Bo. It would place him in a cowering position hiding behind a 3-foot wall a few feet in front of him that separated him from the shooter. Conversely, Amber's defense called the incident a tragic accident, as these were innocent circumstances that came together in all the wrong ways. They argued that justice could not be served by rushing to judgment as the prosecution had done. Amber Guyger firmly and reasonably believed that she was in her own apartment. Amber Guyger firmly and recently believed that she confronted an intruder in her apartment. Amber Guyger firmly and reasonably believed that she had no choice, that she had no options but to use her gun to keep all from dying. A central question being asked was whether it was reasonable for Amber to have believed that she was entering her own apartment. In Texas, in 2019, they had what was called the Castle Doctrine, which was a hotly debated law. Basically, the law allows for a homeowner to protect themselves from intruders. In the language, there is an exception made for what is called a mistake of fact, meaning a mistake made in a particular situation could be accepted as fact if the mistake was reasonable, letly pervert the actual purpose of law, and allow for the intruder to be justified in shooting the homeowner. Was it reasonable that Amber believed she was entering her own home from the parking garage after she left her truck? Amber needed to walk across a skyway that linked the lot of her building. It's an open-air garage that allows for a 180-degree visual of the roof line off the apartment complex. Prosecutors suggested that the difference in elevation from the 4th floor where she was to the 3rd floor where she actually lived would have been quite noticeable, particularly on a walk that she made to and from her truck on a daily basis. There are 2 hallways that she needed to walk down to reach her unit. It would take a young and fit person, such as Amber, carrying all of her gear, an estimated 1.5 to 2 minutes to walk these 2 longer hallways. During this walk, she would pass 16 apartment doors, each of which has a lit unit number next to the door. All of these would have started with a 4 for the 4th floor. If she wasn't looking up and so missed all of her surroundings, it's argued that she could have noticed the floor mat differences along the hallway, as well as other decorative elements, such as a distinct and very large urn that is usually placed outside of one of her neighbor's doors, which would have been absent on the 4th floor. She didn't notice Bo wanted his apartment to be very noticeable, and he took steps to make sure that happened. In front of Bo's apartment is this extremely obvious bright red floor mat right in front of his door. I want to reiterate, Amber Guyger had no floor mat, and she walked right up and stepped on top of this. Of the 349 residents of the Southside Flat Apartments in September 2018, 297 were polled by the defense to see how common it was to get a bit confused navigating the standardized design of the hallway with the identical-looking units. 71 of those spoken to who lived on either the 3rd or 4th floors admitted to having walked into the wrong apartment by accident at some point. That is nearly a quarter of all residents that lived on the floors. The media and public observers of the case at the time all questioned how a trained police officer could miss so many signs that night. Her team says this was likely due to exhaustion after overtime hours, days on end, and another 13-hour shift. Amber was moving on autopilot. Prosecutors suggested a slightly different theory, as phone records showed Amber on the phone with a colleague of hers that night. Martin Rivera, her patrol partner, with whom she was also romantically involved. Their texts indicated that the 2 may have been planning to get together that night, so how tired could Amber have been? The two were exchanging racy text messages right up to the moment that she reached the apartment door. Two more texts were sent from Amber to Martin a few minutes past 10 p.m., while Bo lay on the ground struggling to breathe. Should you be giving 100 of your attention to the person who's dying in front of you? If you can, yes, you should. You be sending text messages. Both of them erased the text from their phones, but investigators were nonetheless able to retrieve them. Martin Rivera was married at the time and said these were not conversations that either of them wanted to remember. In addition to the details of the affair casting Amber in a very unpleasant light, the jury was shown postings of hers on social media that further diminished her character. A conflicting story to Amber's was offered by one neighbor, Joshua Brown, who had returned home to his apartment within moments of Amber entering Bo's home from down the hallway. Joshua testified that he heard the two encounter each other as if by surprise, and then immediately he heard gunshots. Most notably, Joshua did not hear Amber yell at Bo to raise his hands or offer any other type of warning. Do you recall ever hearing someone say, "Hey, put your hands up"? Joshua had met Bo only once, and he broke down in tears in court when he began to testify. Joshua said he heard Bo singing gospel music from across the hall every morning. 10 days after testifying, Joshua was shot to death himself in the parking lot of the apartment complex where he lived. Joshua had reportedly moved about 3 months after Bo died, and the timing of his murder fueled rumors that his role in the trial had made him a target, with some alleging a conspiracy by local law enforcement police, obviously denied all accusations, and further pointed out that if a witness was going to be killed to prevent their testimony, it would usually occur before, not after they had given it. In December, 3 men that Joshua knew personally were indicted for his murder, as they may have been attempting to rob him. Prosecutors argued that Amber had made the decision to shoot to kill the apparent intruder inside the apartment the moment that she heard shuffling noises and acknowledged that there was someone inside. This was before she had even opened the door, inning leading up to the encounter, from the way she parked her truck, how she left her firing hand free, and the double tap technique that was used. But after this, Amber's police radio was working but not used. And after her tragic mistake, her first aid kit remained untouched amongst her gear. Is there a reason why you didn't use this stuff right here, which is designed to control traumatic bleeding? It never crossed my mind. It didn't even cross your mind, no, sir. Even though he's bleeding in front of you. No, and this is inches from you. It did not cross. It never crossed your mind to use this. No, sir. This is the first aid kit that's also included in there, right? Yes, sir. And you've got more of that exact same stuff in here. 10:03 p.m. And at 10:02 p.m., you sent text messages to Mark Rivera. Yes, I did send text messages that would have required you to put the phone in a place where you can see it, and you used your fingers to write out the words. I need you, hurry, ... right? I don't remember how many hands I used. You texted Mr. Rivera using your hands? Yes, I did, and as you were doing that, you were unable to give Mr. John your full attention, the attention that he deserved. Yes, I did, and then you made the choice to do that a second time. Isn't that true? Yes, sir. All right, so from here to where you were at the door, that's where you decided to shoot twice? Yes. Okay, that's called a double tap, right? Yes, sir. Is that what you were intending? Yes, sir. That's your training, isn't it? Yes, it's what we're trained to do. In training, double tap maximizes the lethality of your shooting, doesn't it? Yes, sir. I just did what I was trained to do. Because you resort to training, right? Yes, I do. You rely on your training? Yes, sir. It aids you? Yes, sir. And in crisis, you resort to your training? Yes, sir. When you shot at Mr. John, you knew you were using deadly force against him? Yes. You know what a bullet can do, don't you? Yes, I do. And when you shot at him twice, you intended to kill him? Yes, sir. All right, closing arguments were watched intently nationwide, while continued protests and demonstrations fed the media frenzy and speculation for the outcome. The jury deliberated for about 5 hours. They dismissed both the lesser charge of manslaughter and Amber's contention that she had acted in self-defense. She was found guilty of murder with malice, as she had admitted on the stand that she had shot to kill. 2 jurors who spoke about the decision-making process after the trial told the press that they struggled far more with the sentencing deliberations than agreeing on the conviction. Within 5 minutes of being in the room, they said they had voted to convict Amber of murder. They said her affair, text messages, and social media posts had little to no influence on the decision. They believed what the prosecution had asserted, that she had decided to fire her weapon with the intent to kill before she was fully through the door. The prosecution requested that the jury consider a sentence of 28 years for the conviction when those closest to Bo took the stand. During the sentencing phase of the trial, it was only days after what would have been his 28th birthday. I always refer to him as the glue to my 3 kids because he was able to relate to Alyssa and bring Alyssa to Brant and vice versa. Bo was also this take charge type of person, so he was always giving advice both to Alyssa and to Brant. For the jury, based on what they understood of the man that Bo was, they did not think this is what he would have wanted. They said if both of them had been shot and survived, they believed that he would have forgiven Amber Guyger. Despite the power to give up to 99 years in prison and the recommendation of 28, the jurors agreed to give Amber Guyger 10 years, which included some time served. If I forgive you, and I know if you go to God and ask him, he will forgive you. After the jurors had left the courtroom, Bo's brother stepped down from the witness stand and embraced his brother's killer in an act of forgiveness. The jury said seeing this later validated the decision they had made, that is the heartbreaking story of Botham Jean and the conviction of Amber Guyger. Thank you for watching, and please like, subscribe, or comment. Until the next one.